It is the year of the tiger, and you're listening to Queer Lives with me, Hina Siddiqui, where I have conversations with queer people from across the world because I want to. Please do note this podcast deals with mature subjects and explicit language will be used. Audience discretion is advised. Episode 5, the first time I'm recording during daylight hours, and today I'm talking to Nerissa Trindade. Originally from India, Nerissa now lives in Australia. She's a professional transformational speaker, author of 2 best-selling books too, a migrant gay woman of color, and a carer for her wife. Welcome to Queer Lives, Nerissa. So good to have you here. Hi, Nerissa. How are you?
I'm well, Hina. Lovely to speak to you today.
I'm so happy that you're joining us from Australia. And we're going to jump right into this. And this question that I give everyone. So I'm going to ask you, what is your story? And feel free to answer that in any way that you feel comfortable.
Sure. Wow, that's quite an open-ended question. And
yes.
great way to start, I guess. Well, let me say it this way. Well, when you meet me today, you meet a person that is very confident. You meet a person that is really comfortable in their own skin, that knows who they are, is comfortable with their identity, and is able to speak up for themselves. But this wasn't always the case. And I lived for a very long time in my life. I lived a very shelled version of myself. So I grew up in India way back in the 1980s. And growing up, I was told that everything about me was wrong. From the way that I dressed, the way I stood, the way I walked, I was told that it was all wrong because I didn't kind of conform to, what society wanted me to be. I wasn't, the little girly girl with long hair. I didn't like to wear dresses and skirts. I was very tomboyish. I was always, out in shorts and a t-shirt, out on the playfield, and that didn't sit right with society. And because it didn't, I was made to feel like I was different. And I was bullied at school. I was misunderstood at home. And basically, my whole life, I was made to fit into this box that I didn't really fit into. And the more that I was forced and pushed into the box, the more it impacted me as a person. And over time, I lost parts of me and parts of my identity. I lost my confidence, my self-belief, my self-worth. And I really began living a shelled version of myself. And it took me a really long time to get to the point where, I was once sitting in a meeting room, I remember, because I moved from India to Australia, and all of that continued with me. I ended up being somebody who was so scared to even speak up in a meeting.
Right.
And I remember sitting in a meeting one day and I looked around and I said, if something happened to me tomorrow, would anybody here know who I am? And that's when the question really hit me, because it was asking myself that question, is that how can anybody else know who I am when I myself don't know who I am? And that then sent me it put me on a path or a journey of self-discovery. And it took a long period and a long time of really a lot of internal work to go through and break some of those limiting beliefs, some of that narrative that I'd been living, to finally get to a point where I found myself, I think it was on the 8th of August, 2011. And I found myself standing on a balcony, my apartment balcony on the 6th floor. And I remember, it was a cold winter's day. And I remember standing there and I had picked the exact time, the exact day, because it had to be a time when no one was at home. I'd picked the place where I was standing. So it was, behind a pillar, so my neighbors wouldn't be able to see what I was about to do. Because that day I was going to do something that I had never, ever done before. And as I stood there, like I felt my knees knocking. I could feel my heart pounding. I could, like, when you've been really, really scared and you're trying to do something, but I knew that it had to happen. Like, that was the day it had to happen. And as I reached down and I picked up my phone from my pocket, I could feel my hand like just trembling. But I said, no, I've got to go ahead and do this. And I remember dialing the number of my sister who was in India. And I hoped that she would be home and that she would pick up my call. And when she answered the phone, I just said to her, I was like, I've got to tell you something. I'm gay. And when I said that to her the first time, like, I felt this release, this weight lifted off my chest. Like, finally I had said to somebody the thing that had tormented me for so long. And even though I felt a sense of relief and a sense of, wow, this liberation and freedom, I was still terrified of what her response was going to be. So I remember holding on to that balcony rail to steady myself. And, what came after that was something that I couldn't have imagined in my wildest of dreams. What she then said to me was 3 words that completely changed my life. And she said, I accept you. I accept you. And, it's 3 very simple and basic words. But in that moment, it was all that I needed to hear and know, feel a sense of belonging, a sense that, I'm on the right path, that I can actually do this. And it was that day that set me then on a path to bring me to where I am today, a place where I feel comfortable, where I feel confident, where I'm happy to share my story, where I live authentically as who I am. And since doing that, I've seen my career take off on a trajectory that I never dreamed possible. I've seen doors open for me that I didn't think would happen. And it got me to the point where I now truly believe that anything, and this is the framework that I live by and that I share, and it goes in my book as well, is that, anything is possible when you can be yourself, believe in yourself, and back yourself. 3 things. And when you can do that, that's when, there's absolutely endless possibilities. And, that's when you really start growing through life and figuring out what it all means. And yeah, so that's what's led me today to where I am. That's been kind of my story. I now live in Australia. I have a beautiful wife that I'm married to. This is now home. And what I do today is I write, I speak, I share my story. And today I am a speaker, a professional speaker, and a speaker coach, because I want to enable others to be able to share their stories, because that's what people are here to do, and I want to give people the opportunity to be able to just share their stories, because there's no better feeling, honestly, than living authentically as yourself.
I think what's been really awesome listening to you right now is just seeing the way your face kind of reflects what you are saying. I'm saying this out loud because if some people are listening to this later on, they like this sense of the seriousness and then this sense of joy that comes on your face when you talk about living authentically. I'm just gonna go dig a little deeper into some of the points that you raised. Can we talk a little bit more about growing up in India? And, because that's significant. In India is where I am as well. And you speak about growing up in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s. And a lot of us, a lot of younger people today don't get the significance of not having the internet or not having community growing up. And I was hoping you could go a little bit more into the details of growing up in India and what that meant for you and how that impacted you.
Absolutely. I often say that I didn't know what it meant to be gay. I didn't know, I couldn't, like, if I look back now and I think about my life in reflection, if I knew the words, I would have probably come out when I was maybe 10 or 11. But back then, it's really weird when you say that, because people living today don't understand that concept, because like you said, there was no internet. There was no literature. There was no person that I could see on TV or in media or in papers or even in school, even in my circle, in the society that I lived in, there was nobody that I could look up to and say, that person resembles a bit of who I am, or that, you know, that's who I want to grow up and be like. There was no resemblance. I didn't see me represented in anyone. So as a young kid growing up in India, I felt very alone. And initially, like I said, it was kind of me just being a tomboy. And I thought, that's just who I am. You know, I was involved in a lot of sports. That's who I wanted to be. But as we got older, you know, in school, you know, go to the phase of, you know, people having crushes in school. And, you know, I'm sure, like, I went to an all-girls school, and we all had crushes on girls. But as you get older, then people start having crushes on boys. And I was like, well, I didn't really have one, but because that was considered the norm and everyone had one, I felt like I should have one. So I thought of a guy that, you know, I felt like, yeah, he was okay to be good to be friends with. And I was like, yeah, okay, I have a crush on this guy. But it wasn't really how I felt, the way I felt about girls. And, you know, I talk about being bullied in school, and it's interesting because we talk about the concept of, you know, being gay, not spoken about, not read about. Yet when it came to bullying, it was a concept that people understood in that context. So it was something negative. It was something that you didn't want to be.
Right.
And again, I went to an all-girls school that was run by strict Irish nuns, and we were taught in school that if you were gay, you're going to hell. You know, that is what we were taught. Like, you couldn't be gay. So I was a kid who was like, well, I can't be Indian and gay, because it was like this Western concept. Right. And I can't be Indian Christian and gay. So this is not me. So even though I had those feelings and thoughts and desires, I kept going, I kind of kept pushing them away. And I was like, no, this is not me, because how can I be this way? There's nobody else like this. None of my friends are experiencing this. And, you know, looking back now, we like, there's so many people I know now that I think, okay, they've come out, and, you know, had we known back then, it would be so cool. Like, we could have just formed our own little group and kind of been able to talk to each other, because we've all experienced that growing up in India. But back then, honestly, you know, there was nobody to talk to. I couldn't confide in even my closest friends. I couldn't confide in the teachers, in my parents. And what happened is that you start leading a very lonely, isolated, and a very, very scared life, because I was like, and it also starts playing on your mind as to, why are people thinking this? Like, you know, and to me, in that point, naively, I thought it's because I dress this way. Surely it's because of the way I dress. You know, I had short hair. It wasn't this short back then, but it was short. And I thought, surely it's because I have short hair, and I'm, you know, I'm always, you know, dressed like a little boy. So that's why people think I'm gay. But then my friends would be in shorts and t-shirts, and they'd be doing things. And I'm like, well, why aren't they being questioned? What is it about me that is being questioned? And I thought it was that physical appearance. So then I went down a path where I completely changed that. So I started wearing dresses. I started putting on makeup. I wore heels. I did everything girly that I could possibly do. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But I thought, if I did it, it would change how I felt internally. But the more I did it, it just made me feel worse, because no matter how much I changed on the outside, nothing changed on the inside. Those feelings didn't go away. No matter how much I tried to push it down, it would always come up. And yeah, then it got to the point where I was like, you know, I don't want to live a lie any longer. Even if I come out and I lose everyone in my life, which at that point for me was a reality. I thought, even if I lose everyone in my life, I still have to do this because I want to be true to me. And I have to do this for me. And yeah, that's when I did it. And since then, everything's changed. I
also want to ask, I know you've just kind of given me a measure of what it meant to be growing up in this world where you didn't have the language or the concepts, and everything was directed inwards as opposed to an understanding of how you fit into the world. But were there any safe spaces you found? Were there any moments of, okay, I feel like this is my thing as you were growing up here?
Not really. I didn't have, and like I said, school wasn't a safe place for me because I was bullied at school. Home wasn't a safe place for me because I didn't really, I mean, the adults around me didn't understand what I was going through. Like my mom was always supportive, and she was probably the only one that stood up for me and fought for me. And it's probably my mom that I'm still here today. And I have a lot to be thankful and grateful for her. But other than her, there was nobody that actually understood what I was going through. So, and I think as a kid, those are your two safe places, your home and your school. And neither for me felt safe in the sense that I could express who I was. So, whilst my friends were great, and I kind of hid in the shadow of that a bit because I was like, if I hang out here, I feel happy. I still can't be me, but I'm happy. And if I can just go along with what is happening around, I can somehow hide in that shadow and I don't have to be me. And therefore I can exist in this space. But in terms of the safe space, I had to create that for myself. And the space that I created was one behind closed doors for me. Because behind closed doors, I could be me. So if I closed the door, I could dress up the way I wanted to. I could be that person that I wanted to be. I could stand the way I wanted. I could walk the way I wanted. I could imagine myself being with the girls that I wanted to be. And I've had relationships in India, before I came out, but it was all behind closed doors. Everything happened behind a closed door. And I was always terrified, like, what happens if I open this door? And that was never a possibility. But yeah, it was closed behind closed doors. And often, if I wasn't able to close the door, then I remember as a teenager, I would often spend a lot of time in my room just in darkness. Because I thought, if nobody can see me and if nobody can hear me, then I can just be me. So a lot of my teenage years existed in darkness, where I'd just sit in a room and turn off the light. So I could just be me. And I was like, once that light came on, then I'd again have to be somebody that I wasn't.
And so growing up, and then you moved to Australia. And can we talk about how that came to be, and maybe just also get into like something like your education, what kind of jobs you picked up in Australia and stuff like that?
Sure. So I did my undergrad, I did my school and my undergrad in India. And then I moved to Mumbai in India to work. And after that, I think it just so happened that I was in a relationship at that time, and the person that I was in a relationship with moved on and moved overseas. And my friend and I came back to Calcutta, where I'm from. And when I got back, I was like, oh, this life just sucks. Like, I was heartbroken. I was back in a city where, I didn't want to be, I couldn't be me. And I didn't really see a way out. And I wasn't, a really studious person. Like, because of everything that had happened, I had no ambition. I couldn't see myself achieving anything. Life for me was just kind of meandering on and meandering through. It was kind of moving from one thing into another. I was failing in a lot of things. There was no hopes. There was no ambition. I had no confidence, no self-esteem. Very different to who I am today. And so one of my friends a lot of my friends at that time were actually moving overseas and going to study. And the friend that I'd gone to Mumbai with as well, she moved as well, and she went overseas. And I was like, well, there's no one really here. Maybe it's what I need to do as well. Let's move overseas. So yeah, I applied to Australia, and I've got some family here. And I moved here to study. And even then, I didn't have any kind of thought process even that I was going to Australia to come out, because that concept didn't exist. At that point, I didn't even know that I was gay, or what I was experiencing meant that I was gay or I had to come out. All of that didn't exist. It was just get on a plane to maybe get a different life, get a different experience, and see if there's something else to change my story. And that's what happened. I came here, and I landed as an international student here many years ago. And I'm sure some people listening to this who are international students would understand that when you arrive in a place, you know, people tell you what it's going to be like, and you have certain expectations, but then when you land, it's completely different. And you're left to kind of find out your own, you know, reference points and understanding of what that means. So yeah, I was here, and I studied in university. I made friends, and through university, I guess I got a better understanding of, you know, there were like advocacy groups, and you know, people were talking about LGBTIQ people and what that meant, and you know, there were rallies and parades and pride marches, and that's when I started understanding. I was like, okay, there are other people maybe like me. And by then, thankfully, there was the internet. So then, you know, I could Google, and I remember, you know, watching videos about Ellen coming out, and I think it was Ricky Martin then that came out on Oprah. I thought, wow, like how are they doing this? You know, what does that mean? And I remember going to my first Pride March here, and I was so scared because I loved seeing all of the celebration, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, people actually get to be who they are and march down the street. And it's like, you know, people are cheering them on. Like the story I knew, like my narrative, this was completely different too, because in my mind, that was being wrong. Like that was, if I did that, I was going to be killed or jailed or sent to hell. So how are these people here so openly doing this? And so I was standing there going, wow, this is amazing. But then the friends I'd gone with, I was like, well, they were all Indian. And at that point I was like, well, if I'm appearing to enjoy this, does that mean they're going to think I'm gay? I don't want to be associated with it. So I kind of pretended not to enjoy it. And I was like, just let's get out of here. I don't want to be here. And I left. So yeah, that was my first experience of it. But it was through being in Australia, through meeting people, going to different groups, and then you see it, like, you know, there was more on TV. Yeah, you get more exposed and you get an understanding of it. I Googled, I read, and I was like, finally, I found, you know, the word and what it meant to be gay. And I was like, okay, this is me. But even then, it took me a very long time. Like and I often think it's two layers. Like one, it's going, okay, I'm gay. And then the next bit is like, okay, what does it mean now for me? What does it mean for me, for my life, for my family, for society, for all of that things historically and generations of conditioning that I've had? What does that now mean? What does it mean for my faith? Because I've been told that it's wrong and you're going to hell. So all of those questions then started coming up, and it was navigating through those on various layers to finally be able to come out and say, look, this is who I am.
Just for some context for the kids at home, can you give this a time period? Like, is there a number of years you can give this this journey took?
I came to Australia in 2004, and I didn't come out till I was in 2011, like I said. So that's 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. And, you know, I think the first few years, it was kind of very much just working out who I am, working out, I guess, not even who I am, but working out, firstly, what all of this meant, you know, understanding the new, what my life here meant. And the first few years, it was just around, you know, fitting in. And that's when, you know, I was doing everything to not be gay. It was hiding from who I was the first few years. It was just kind of creating a life here, you know, getting used to things here, feeling comfortable, finding my space in society here, understanding the culture, understanding the norms, navigating, university, working, finding a job, all of that. So like my sexuality was on the back burner. It was like, first, let me see if this is a place I want to live in. So that kind of took the first chunk of the years. And then it was like, okay, now I know this is where I want to stay. Now I have some time to work on me. And then it was understanding, okay, who am I? Getting to that point of being, okay, this is who I am. But then from the point, I think that I went, okay, I've got to do this, to the point that I actually came out, was probably another 8 to 9 months of me going, okay, I'm gay. I've got to tell people now. But then actually getting to the point where I told the first person, probably 9 months.
Wow. So I'm just kind of going through this sense of, we discuss these things so quickly in like an hour worth of an interview, but it's an entire lifetime. And this whole idea of, and we talk about questioning, we talk about being confused, but it's really just being forced to take control of your identity in a way, right? Because some people have this is the format, please follow it, and they are happy to follow it. And when you have to break out of the format is when it requires actual, conscious application of all of that. And I'm really glad that you're talking about that. I also think that's also a large part of your book, growing through, right? Where you are talking about how you grow through. I keep mispronouncing it. Growing through life in different aspects. Could you talk a little bit more about that book and what it gives out in the world?
Yeah, sure. So my first book is called Growing Through, and it's how coming out transformed my life. And it's very much a raw, authentic story told, like I tell my story of what it was growing up in India, of what it was to be a little kid who was really confident, fun-loving, really outgoing, to then move through school where, things started, where I first saw a difference in school. And I realized that very early on that if my differences were something that were accepted by society, then they were okay. But if my differences were something that were not accepted by the norm and by society, then they were not okay. And, it goes through that in the book, and it takes you through my journey of kind of moving through and what I was thinking through school. It goes through the years of being bullied, of being kind of troubled at home and school and not finding that safe place. And then it goes through the whole transition of, I guess it goes through the relationships that I was in, how those kind of ended, how it left me feeling. It talks through failure, because I failed in school. I failed at my boards, and to this day, I know that it was because I was so traumatized by everything else that was going in, that there was no capacity even in my brain to comprehend, studies or anything else, because there was so much internal conflict. And it talks through that, and it gives you that real insight. And then it goes through in terms of coming out, into Australia, what it was like to study, to apply for jobs, to get rejected, to get fired from my first job, and then going into what led to my coming out, the entire coming out story, and then how my life is completely transformed now, where people probably that knew me before and know me now have gone like, hold on, who is this person? And people that I meet now, and I tell them my story, and they're like, I can't imagine you as anyone else but this person. And I'm like, well, if only you knew. So if only you knew. So yeah, and it talks through, and you see that entire transformation at the end. And I talk about a concept of growing through, and why the book is called Growing Through. It's because of this, because I feel like we're all journeying through life, And we all get to a place or a point in our lives where there is no way out and there is no way around. And the only way is through. And at that time, we have a decision to make. Do we choose to simply go through, where we're just meandering through, hoping that we might make it through? And that's how my childhood was. I was just going through life. Or do we choose to get through, where we have intention and purpose of making it through? And we do make it through. But then when we come back and we're faced with that same challenge, that same conflict, we find ourselves stuck, unable to move forward. But it's when we choose to grow through life, that is when we allow ourselves to learn from what we are experiencing and to take learnings from that into the next. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to process all that is happening, for us to almost break from the person that we've been to become the person that we need to be. And when we grow through that process, that's what allows us to build resilience. And that's where there is true transformation, hope, and possibility. And that's what the concept of growing through really means. And what I encourage people to do is to not just go through life and get through life, but actually grow through everything that is coming at us, because that is where absolute possibility lies.
Tell us a little bit more about the process of writing and why you chose to write this book, because I'm getting the feeling that writing this book was also about you kind of articulating your journey for yourself as well as for others. So what brought about the writing of the book, and what was the process of writing it?
Yeah, sure. So it was 2020 when I was doing a kind of speaking course. I remember at the beginning of the year, and that's when the idea was planted. This was about March 2020. And just after that, COVID hit, and the world as we knew it completely changed. So obviously that little idea of mine, as most of us do, it gets put in a little box and it gets stored somewhere, right? And then at about June, I thought, let me open that box again and figure out, we were all in isolation at the moment. There was a lot more time and space for us to think about things that we wanted to do. And I thought, let me take it out again. So I brought out the idea again of writing this book. And I started, talking to people and, about how to do it. But I thought then, all of that negative stuff comes into your head where like, who will care about my story? Why do I need to share it? It's only my story. What good is it going to, who is it going to resonate with? Is it going to make a difference? And I think when you share a personal story, and for me, it was the first time writing a book, first time sharing my story in that kind of open platform. It's a very vulnerable thing to do. And so I sat with that again for a long time of, should I not? And then in August, I did a podcast, similar to what we're doing today, where I shared my story. And the response that I got from that podcast, I remember there was a mother that contacted me, and she said, thank you for sharing your story, because it has now changed the way I will talk to my kid.
Oh, wow.
And I get goosebumps when I think about it now as well, but it really touched me. And I said, wow, that my story is actually having an impact in someone's life. And that was always the reason behind writing the book, was to impact that one person. If there was one kid's life that I could change, having been through the life that I'd been through, there was one kid's life that I could change, one kid that felt, that they weren't alone, that they weren't different, that there was someone else in the world that was like them, that had been through what they're feeling and going through, then I wanted to write for that one kid. I wanted to write for that one parent who could have a different conversation, that one teacher who might approach the subject differently with that kid in school. And that was always the concept behind why I wanted to share my story, was to change that one person's life. And so it was in August that the podcast went. So then I said, okay, I've got to write this book. So I started talking to people to go, how do I do it? Because because I'd never written anything. I'd never done anything like this before. I started contacting editors to see who I could work with. And I got asked a question. They said, when do you want to get the book out? And I said, the book has to go out in 2020. And we were in August 2020. And they were like, have you started writing? And I said, no, I haven't started writing the book. And they're like, well, it's impossible. It's not going to happen. You know, people take a year or 2 years to write a book. We're already at the end of August. No, your book's not going to come out. And I said, okay. And I thought to myself, well, maybe you're not the person I need to work with then. But anyway, I started writing my book in September. I found an editor who was good, was someone from India who decided to work with me. I found a designer that would work with me, and together we formed our team. I formed my team, and I started writing in September of 2020. And on the 28th of December 2020, Growing Through went on pre-sale. And within hours of being on pre-sale, it hit #1 internationally on Amazon. So it was then that I knew, like, okay, wow, this truly is possible, like something that I dreamt of doing and thought I'm not going to be able to do. Like I said, when you can be yourself, believe in yourself, and back yourself, anything is possible. And that became possible. And then when I started reading the reviews coming back, I was like, wow, like this actually resonates with people. My story resonates. People, you know, are not only reading it, but they're sharing it. They're sharing it with their friends. They're giving it to their colleagues to read. There's conversations happening. And it, you know, it started interviews and podcasts and speaking engagements that, you know, were not just in Australia, but in India and internationally, that people wanted to hear my story, and it was making a difference. And I thought, wow, this is pretty incredible. You know, I wanted to impact one life, and yeah, it's been definitely more than one. So very humbled.
It's very exciting to hear this, because writing a book is considered such a, I mean, it's a difficult task for a lot of people, and it's a task that a lot of people aspire to. And I'm not saying you made it sound easy, but the idea that there are real stories of people who actually just want to write books and make it happen, I think that's really nice to hear.
It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's easy. I will say it's possible, but not everything that is possible is easy.
It's easy.
And I think we live in a world today where we want kind of things to happen instantly. You know, the whole kind of social media lives around the instant gratification thing. We want things to happen, but we don't want to do the work. But so there's a difference in that, right? It's not easy, but it will always be worth it if you actually put in the work and do it. So were there many late nights? Yes. You know, there were days that I worked 16 hours, 20 hours a day to meet that and make it happen. There were times when we thought it wasn't going to happen due to multiple reasons. But when you have a goal and a mission and reason, a strong enough why, and my why was never about, you know, getting to #1 on Amazon or selling this thing. People ask me today, like, how many copies have you sold? And I'm like, I don't know, because that's not why I'm doing it. That is not my goal. My goal was to change people's lives, was to change or help to change conversations, to shift the dialogue, to get people talking about these things. And it's achieved that. And that's what I'm really, truly happy about.
I want to dial back a little bit and ask, so you are a speaker, transformational speaker, you coach speakers, and you're a writer. But where we last heard your coming out story, you were still an employee in an organization. So tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, so yeah, I've worked in many organizations. My background is in change management and project management, and up until last year, that's what I do. That's what I do. And I just felt last year that I wanted to take a break. And, you know, like I said, everything from my book just kind of took off, and, you know, speaking engagements were happening, interviews were happening, podcasts were happening. And again, like, you know, there's a whole nother story on why I speak and why I do this. But yeah, last year I thought I want to take a break. I took a well-being year, and I said I want to just take some time out to do the things that I want to do, to spend time with the people that I love, and to just put more joy back happiness back in my life. And I think, given the last 2 years and everything that had happened, I was like, well, I want to make a difference today, and I want to do it now. So that's when I started. I launched my speaking and coaching business last year, and this is what I do today. But the story that I'll share with you about speaking is that, again, I never, ever dreamed of speaking in public or speaking on camera. It was just not something that I ever thought I would do, because I was somebody that was really, really shy. I was really scared. I had no confidence. I wouldn't even read in class. Like, we're asked to stand up and read in class. I couldn't even do that. I used to remember my hands shaking. The words used to jump on the page. I couldn't read. I would always hide. When they say, who wants to present? I would always hide in the back going, please do not pick me. Like, it helped being short because people would see me. But in the line of work that I did, being in change and project management, we were always called up to go, you've got to share something, you've got to present. So I thought, if I'm going to have to keep doing this, then I better get really good at it. And that's when I said, all right, I've got to invest in myself. I've got to invest in me. And, I took courses, I got coaches, I got mentors, and I really built this person you see today has been one that has been worked on. It didn't happen overnight. This is not who I was, but it is somebody that has done the work, that has been here today, and feels really comfortable now to share story. And I think story is so very important, because it helps change lives. It helps shift the narrative. Story is what brings content to life. It brings data and stats to life. And that's what I want to help more people do, is to tell their stories, to share it. And that's why I do what I do.
And that is, again, so significant, because, people see the final product, and the belief is, oh, okay, this must have been, this is how it happened. You were born this way, right? And, and it's just so important to know that there is a massive process and a lot of work that goes into building the person. And it's actually a process of building. Like, it's not about, oh, I'll just, be myself today. Just I wanted to iterate that this is significant. Like, there is a process, and the process takes time, and that is okay. I think that's important for a lot of us to know.
Yes. And I think you're right, because, again, we tend to look at somebody else's success and go, look where they are today, and how do I get there? And how do I get there? There's people advertising you can become this in 5 days and 10 days and in 2 days. But everyone has a personal journey. Everyone has their own timeline, and we all have to do the work. So are things possible? 100% they are. But you have to be willing to do the hard things to get there. You have to be willing to have the discipline, the commitment, the consistency to keep doing it to get to where you are. But absolutely, we can all be and achieve the things that we want to. Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I think I'm going to highlight that somehow. Let's talk about mental health. I know that you've been, your second book deals with that, A Different Reality. And you speak about, you just mentioned taking a well-being year. And I want to know what your relationship with mental health is, and with self-care and caregiving.
Sure. So, my second book is called A Different Reality. And it's a book I've co-authored with my wife, Charlie, who lives with a mental health diagnosis. So she lives with a diagnosis that is called schizoaffective disorder and PTSD. So PTSD, as we know it, is post-traumatic stress disorder. And schizoaffective disorder is a combination of schizophrenia, which more people know of, combined with a mood disorder. So it could be bipolar or depression. And what Charlie has is the depression side of that, with a combination of schizophrenia. Now, again, like with most things growing up in India, I didn't have any concept of mental health and well-being. I mean, you know that, you know, things have changed now, but again, back in the 80s, 90s, it was very much just get up and get on with it. You know, there was no concept of saying, by the way, I'm struggling today. I'm not able to cope. I'm not feeling well enough, not physically, but I'm mentally struggling. So initially I had no understanding about mental health. And when we first got together and Charlie shared her diagnosis with me, I felt quite out of depth. I didn't know how to react, how to respond, but we were very good friends initially, and that allowed me to ask questions. And I asked questions and I allowed her to explain things to me. And, you know, slowly I understood a bit more about it. But even when we started in the relationship, there was a lot, when I look back now, that I didn't know, that we didn't know about what it would be like living with somebody and caring for someone with mental health. And at that point, I didn't even know that I was a carer. You know, I was in love with this woman, and then I got married. I mean, we got married, and, you know, by virtue of my nature and my relationship to this person, I found myself in the role of a carer. And initially I didn't understand what that meant. I was like, well, I'm her wife, so I'm doing it because I'm her wife. It was only when I realized that, well, actually I am in the role of a carer, and that I need to go out and ask for help for myself. So she was getting help. She was, you know, seeing a psychiatrist and seeing a psychologist. But it was only when we both made an effort to go out and ask for help that I was going to get help to better look after myself, so I could better care for her. That's when it made a big difference in our relationship. And in the book, A Different Reality, the reason it's called A Different Reality is because for somebody that lives with schizoaffective disorder, they experience hallucinations and delusions. So my wife hears voices, and often for somebody not experiencing it, it's really hard to understand. But for the person experiencing it, for them, everything is real. Everything that is happening, the hallucinations, the delusions, the voices, that is their reality. It's real. It's just a different reality. And that's why the book is called A Different Reality. And in the book, again, it's a very raw and real encounter. We both share our stories, where she tells hers from the point of a person that's living with mental health, and I share mine as that of a carer. We take you through, again, you know, the diagnosis, what it meant to her being diagnosed, what it meant for me finding out, what it is for her day to day living with a mental health condition, what it's meant for me in my relationship with her, in the roles that I've been able to take on. And then we talk around communication, around acceptance, around treatments that, you know, we've experienced, and I experience offered day-to-day strategies that we use to ensure that, you know, we continue to focus on our mental health and well-being, and that the illness so much doesn't take over our lives, but we've now, it's about expanding the wellness. And yeah, we talk about, you know, communication and how to speak to somebody in that way, you know, how to have a conversation, how communication techniques for both of us have changed. And we leave the readers with the last chapter focuses on hope, because we truly believe that there is hope, that even though people are diagnosed, even though we, you know, mental health is serious and significant, that when we get the right help, when we reach out and ask for help, that, you know, there is absolutely a way to live with this, and there is a lot of hope and possibility at the end. So that's what that book is about.
Again, I think a very significant narrative, what you say about getting help for yourself, right?
Yes.
Because again, at least in the Indian context, a large part of it is let's hide the mental illness. Let's not
Absolutely.
talk about it. Let's not have a sit down and say, okay, these are communication strategies. I mean, I love the fact that you use that word, because there is a practical approach, and it's not just an emotional thing that, oh, I love someone and hence I must suffer through, right?
That's right.
And again, so important for us to recognize that and to talk about that. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I'm not going to say are there any tips you would share? That's stupid, but a little bit more about the communication strategy part of things. Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it play out?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of times we can find ourselves in situations where we might not know what to say. But I think if we approach everything from a point of love, understanding, and acceptance, then if we start from there, that shapes the conversation. And, for me, it's very much around not directing, because sometimes what happens when we're caring for someone or we feel like someone's not well, we want to take over. We want to, we'll say, so they'll say, oh, by the way, I'm not feeling well. This is how I'm feeling. And then we just straight in jump in. Yeah, I totally know how you felt. I felt like that too. Here's what happened to me the other day. And it becomes all about us. And when communicating, I want people to know that it's not about us. It's not about our story. It's about the person that we're talking to. It's about their story. It's about what they need. And the other thing is about not assuming that we know everything and that we know all of the answers and what to do. Because what happens, and initially, I was guilty of this too, because being in a relationship with someone, you want the best for them. And you think that, so she would say, this is how I'm feeling, this is the problem. And I'd go, here's the solution. Here's what you should do. We should do boom, 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 and it'll all be fine. And I realized later, it's not so much about knowing what to do and having the right answers. It's more about allowing the person to direct what they need. So before it would be very much, here's what I think you should do. Whereas now the way I communicate is very much around, thank you for sharing that with me. It would have been really hard for you to say that. So I really appreciate you trusting me with sharing that with me. What can I do to help you? Is there anything I can do that will make a difference? Let me know what I can do. And changing it that way, firstly, you create a sense of acknowledgement, that you're acknowledging where the person is and how they're feeling. It ensures that you've understood them, you've acknowledged what they're feeling, and then you're asking how best they want to be helped. And then you're taking their direction. You're not coming on top of it and saying, here's what I think you should do. You're saying, how best can I support you? How best can I help you? And I think that just shifting a couple of things there totally changes the outcome. Of course, if people are suicidal or if they're a threat for themselves or anyone around, then absolutely you need to call, the mental health services available and proceed down that way. But if we're just having conversations with people, I think it's best to go in with the approach of, tell me your side of it, and ask questions, not in a inquisitive way, but what I term as genuine curiosity. Because there's a big difference in being inquisitive or being genuinely curious about something, about, tell me more in a way that I can better understand so I can better help you.
The last episode that we released, I spoke to someone in India, a dear friend of mine called Shruti, and we spoke about caregiving as well because she's living with her mother. And she spoke about these moments where, since they're both survivors of an abusive situation, how sometimes their anxieties and their mental health concerns kind of clash within the moment, and where where one is triggering the other, and there's like a whole feedback trigger mechanism in place. I wanted to know if there is any similarity with the experience that you have, and how do you deal with that? I think that would be really interesting to know if there is.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think, again, when you put on the concept or the hat of a carer, you think, well, I've got to be it, and I've got to, hold the entire responsibility, and I need to be fine. And then therefore I'm supporting someone else. But we're all human. We've all had life experiences. We're all going to be triggered at some point. And it's really important for us as carers as well to understand that, to know that, we are going to be triggered, that we need help. And, there have been times where, my anxiety is triggered. And I've had to reach out, like we're lucky because we see the same therapist. So I've had to reach out and go, by the way, I need a session. I need to talk and I need to find a safe place where I can share and communicate and get the help that I need, so that the next time this happens, I'm either not triggered, or if I am, I have strategies that I can use for myself, and she's got strategies that she can use for her own triggers. Therefore, we're both, I think it's important when you're in a relationship that you're both getting the help that you need to be the best version that you can be in that relationship. Because if I'm correcting her to be how I want her to be, and she's correcting me how she wants me to be, neither of us are going to be happy individually or as a couple. So it's very much about how can I be the best version of myself that I'm taking into the relationship, but how can I also help her bring out the best version of her? And she does the same for me. And I think that's what's really helped us, not just address our triggers, but also work together as a couple.
And again, it being an ongoing process, it's not something that, oh, we've figured it out.
Right. Absolutely. You know, and that's a great point that you raised, because initially, again, in my mind, I thought, okay, well, you know, we're of an understanding where, you know, it's like a broken arm. You go, okay, it's a broken arm. I put it in a sling. I do the physio that I need. It's going to be fixed. But I want people to understand the mental health isn't like that. It's not a do it and fix it solution. There's a lot of work that needs to happen. Yes, it's ongoing. You know, am I saying that not everyone has to always live with it? There are many situations where people recover and you know, they have an episode and then they recover and they don't have it again. But there are certain conditions that are ongoing, that require constant treatment, that there isn't a cure for, that it's about how you live with it and best manage it. And in those cases, absolutely, it's the ongoing work that you do that continues to build on the wellness. So will there be a relapse? Like, will my wife relapse? Yes. Will she have hospital admissions again? Yes. But now we know what they are. We know what to expect from them. And also, even if we don't know, we know that no matter what happens, we'll make it through, because we grow through things together. And that's what changes. And it's always like, you know, the more you learn, the better you can be. And that's the same with anything, right? When we know better, we can do better.
And this would be something that you would say to everyone in any kind of relationship, right? It's not just it's not just because, oh, she's your wife and oh, she has a diagnosed mental health condition, and hence this is what we do. I think this is something that everyone should do with every relationship.
Absolutely. We should, like, personally, I believe the first relationship we have and the most important relationship we have is the relationship we have with ourselves. Because that is the initial one. So before we can go out and tell anyone anything or have a conversation with someone else, what is the conversation you're having with yourself? Whether it's about your mental health, whether it's about life, whether about anything, we need to be talking to ourselves first, having those internal conversations with ourselves, and then going out to others, and, you know, whatever that relationship might be, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's within work, within the community, whatever it might be, because it's how you show up, what you expect from yourself is what you're then going to expect from other people, and how you're going to show up for other people. So, you know, sometimes people go, well, that person needs to change. Well, I'm perfect. That person needs to change. And it's always like, well, maybe you need to check yourselves. You know, I have to check myself too. Like, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And it's that acknowledgement of ourselves that, you know, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all human. We're not going to get it right every time. But it's about the willingness to keep learning, to say, okay, I've made a mistake, but tell me how I can get better at this. How can I do it better? And show me, and be willing to learn, to accept the feedback and take it on board, and then keep growing and keep learning.
I know that this process for you mainly played out in Australia. And this is a question, and it's coming from, like, you know, we're sitting here speaking in English. There is a certain privilege that we share in terms of, you know, our economics and whatnot. But there is this large narrative of especially, I mean, at least I know queer people having this narrative that we will keep our lives in India or in our location on hold till we get somewhere better, right? And I want to know what you think about that, since migration did play a role in your journey.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, and what would you say to this belief that there's a fantasy land full of white people which is better for us?
Firstly, the land I live in is not anyway fantasy or full of white people. But back to the question is look, I don't so much see it as moving overseas, if that's what we're talking about. But I do see it as, if there's something in your life that is not okay, the circumstance or the situation, then by all means, if you have the ability to change that in a way to move out of that circumstance or out of that situation, and if you can do it, then do it. If that serves you well. I'm not necessarily saying that everybody has to do that, because for each person, queer or not queer, LGBTIQA plus or not, our journeys are different, our paths are different. So what works for one person is not going to work for the other person. But I can only speak from my own personal experience. And for me, moving and changing made a difference. Now, I'm not saying you need to come to Australia or you need to move overseas. And by all means, don't wait for that day to come to make the change, right? If you can change today, right? I read this quote the other day where it said, when you're wanting to make a change, is it going to be, I'll make it one day, or is today going to be day one? And I think that's really important to understand, because, my life changed when I moved from Calcutta to Bombay or Mumbai. My life changed when, and people's life changed when they move from school to university, when they move from university to work, when we're not in a relationship to when we are in a relationship. That's the beauty of life. It is constantly changing. It is constantly evolving. But it's up to us at what point we want to make that change. And, it gets to the point where, like, if I think about my story and when I made the decision to change, it wasn't because I was in Australia. It wasn't because I was in the job that I was in, or I was in doing what I was doing, or it was 2011. It was because I'd got to the point where I could no longer live the way I was living. So it was like changing, even though it was going to be really hard. Doing the work, making that decision was going to be hard. Staying the same was harder. And it's about getting to that point where, even though making a change is hard, when staying the same is harder, that's when we get to the point where we go, okay, something has got to change. And then it's up to you, up to the person, up to their circumstance and their situation, where then you look around and you say, what can I change? Maybe it's not possible to change your entire environment, to get up and move, but you can change things that you do every day. You can change things about your perspective, about how you think about things, what you're reading, what you're spending time doing, how much, are you willing to change? How much are you willing to do? And don't always look at it from, somebody's story turned out that way, therefore I have to do the same thing. Look at it from what is relevant to me. What can I do given my deck of cards? Because we're all, again, given a different deck of cards, right? I can't play my game based on your set of cards, and you can't play yours based on mine. I can only play mine based on mine. So if I thought, oh, well, I'm in India now, but I'm going to wait till I get to the US to change my story, that would have never been my story. It only happened because that day I decided, well, today is the day. Today's the day I make a decision that my life from now on is never going to be the same. And then you take it. And even when I feel we make that decision, it's not going to instantly become rosy and amazing. That there's going to be stumbles. You're going to fail. Every time you try something new, there is absolute guarantee that you're going to fail. And if you're not failing, you're probably not trying new things or not trying hard enough, right? So it's about, just keep putting that one step in front of the other, keep moving forward. Change does happen, but it takes time. But just, it's the first thing is actually making the decision to do it and then taking the action to move forward.
We're kind of coming to the place where we wrap things up. I have two main questions now. The first one being, is there something that you want to talk about or share that I didn't know enough to ask about? Is there something that you want to talk about?
I think we've shared a lot about everything. So yeah, I'm comfortable. It's more if you wanted to ask me anything else, that's fine.
I think so. One of the things we do at the podcast is at the end, I request the guests to give the listeners or the watchers a prompt or a provocation. Like it could be a question, it could be a line from somewhere, or it could be a suggested activity. Anything that you think would challenge them or prompt them to do something. So, do you have something of that sort for us?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think today we've spoken a lot about story, about narrative, and I really believe that we all have a story that we have lived, one that we're living, and one that we will live. And it's really up to us to write that story. Just because the beginning didn't turn out the way we wanted to, or maybe currently things aren't going to plan, we still have the ability to change the ending. Because you hold the pen to your story, I hold the pen to my story. And it's about each day what we're choosing to write, and each day what changes we're making, what we're willing to do to change that outcome. And what I would say is that our past does not define our future. It's what we do today that changes it and then defines the outcome. So the question I would leave people with is, what is the story that you are choosing to write today? And is that a story that you would want to read later, or future generations would want to read?
I am just writing this down. Okay, this is really exciting. I think I'm gonna send this out, even if people don't end up listening to the question on the podcast. I'm gonna just send it out on WhatsApp and tell people to answer this. I'm really interested to know what people would say. And thank you so much for this question, this prompt, for just sharing your time with us, us in the royal sense, with me today. Thank you. This has been such an engaging story. That's what it's been. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to chat with you and your audience as well.
Thank you. From being forced into boxes to writing your own story, this past hour has affirmed and revealed a lot to me, and I hope it's done the same for you. I'm going to include links to Nerissa's books and work in the show notes as always. And please do take some time to think about her question and tell us, what story are you going to choose to write? And if you liked what you experienced and would like to get more, check out my website, dragonsandrainbows.com. That's dragons, A-N-D, rainbows.com. And finally, if you are or know queer people who'd like to talk about their queer lives with me, Hina Siddiqui, please do get in touch with me over social media or send me a message through my website. That's it from me, Hina, and hope to see you next time for more Queer Lives.